climate service. It's to take climate data, climate information, that can be from stations, it can be from satellites, remote sensing, it can be from like seasonal forecasting models, that was a model, and make customized products to tailor make. I'll show you some more pictures. To tailor make this to a user. What is the needs of the user? What are their decisions? Who are they? How do they make decisions? What knowledge? That is what a climate service is. So how do we take this information and then maybe using Google Earth Engine or whatever, we can tailor this information, make it useful to a user. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's, in a sense, that's a climate service. And that could be used, and it's climate data, but you can also look at socioeconomic data, like vulnerability of a population. Could also be important to provide this information. And it could be, to support adaptation, mitigation, but also disaster risk reduction. For example, if a drought comes or a flood, but it's usually more in the drought stuff. So that's this concept of climate service. And I really like the word, and I think it's maybe a message to take away. So climate data, okay, but the service connection. What is the service that we are providing with this data? Who does it serve? And so it's like, you serve a coffee, right? If someone needs a coffee, thank you. So that is useful. I lost the focus. Sorry. And I want to introduce something, and it's I'll explain it. Something that we call the climate services, talk about climate service, value chain. How do we add value? And I'll explain it briefly. So on the left here, we have data providers. Where does climate data come from? For example, the Jordan Meteorological Department collects climate data. So they are a data source. Copernicus, or NASA, for example, is a data source. They put satellites in the sky, and they make data available. But the data, like the seasonal forecast, is not necessarily immediately useful to a user. They cannot use it immediately, because what am I going to do with this data? How does it relate to me? It can also be socioeconomic data, or also citizen science data for citizens who collect data. So there's many sources of data. So that's the source. Then we have data integrators, data modelers. For example, this is what we're doing here in this room, this Google Earth Engine. We're going to use data and integrate it, combine it, depending on the needs. So we're going to make maybe data products, right? Could be a drought monitor, could be a flood forecast, it could be a climate projection, many different types of data. And but we don't necessarily talk directly to users all the time, right? So for example, the next step in the value chain is service providers. If I ask you, if Jordan is one of the main service providers of meteorological data, who gives you meteorological data every day on the TV, for example? Huh? The meteorological department, exactly. So the meteorological department is a service provider. They provide the service. But sometimes it's quite general data. And then we have a next step, and this is a very important one. I think maybe it's a very difficult word. It's a service purveyor. Meteorological data for a country is sometimes not so easy to use. So there's a translation step. Like many of you are from agriculture, like agricultural extension. If you're, agricultural extension, that they take data, sometimes like a seasonal forecast, complicated, but they know the farmers. So they speak two languages. They speak the language of the farmer, and they speak the language. Provide advisories based on. They provide advisories, but they also know what the problems of the farmers are. So they translate. They pass knowledge from one to the other. That's a very important role. A very, very important role. And it can be private business, but it can also, often it's a business also. People make money from this. That's right. And it can be private, it can be public. And then you have users on the right who actually use data, which can be, government agencies, user communities, farmers, NGOs, reservoir operators, there's a broad range of users on the line. So we call this the climate service value chain. And the reason that we call it a value chain, I'll come back to what I mean by value later, is that as we go from left to right, we increase value to the user. We make it more tailored, more specific, more, the needs of these different users have different needs, right? So that adds value to them, because if they can use it for a decision, it has value. If they cannot use it for a decision, it has no value, right? We'll talk a little bit about value in a minute. But on the other side, that goes from left to right, the needs are here. So there's also, and this is very challenging, to ensure that you understand what the needs of the user. So the need right to left. So how we integrate the knowledge of the people here, that's what we talked about, and their needs into the value chain. That really needs a lot of thinking. And it's quite challenging. Because, for example, you will not change how a satellite works based on the needs of users. But maybe it's a good idea. Or maybe we should think, no, the satellite should collect this information because that is what we need, right? So let's talk about tailoring. I put a nice picture. What is this guy doing? He's tailoring, right? So he's taking, okay, the person here doesn't have very many needs, but I assume there's a real person, right? So he's measuring. Everybody is a little bit different. Everybody's shoulder is a bit different, the length is different, so they're tailoring something made to measure. So this is what we're talking about, how to tailor climate information to meet user needs. What exactly does farmer A need? Maybe farmer A is different than farmer B, or is definitely different than a reservoir operator. These are different people, they have different needs. So they have a different different cloth, right? So how do we do that? And I know that in this course, we're going to do a bit of this, because what we usually do, we're all scientists, right? I'm a scientist, I'm a civil engineer from training. And I don't think I'm an expert. Some people say I'm an expert. I don't know. But we have scientific knowledge, right? So I use Google and I made this. So I didn't take the course yet, but I cannot teach anymore. Google attention, that's great. But this was where we were working in Mozambique, and we made like a drought monitor. It's quite easy with Google Earth Engine. You can do that in half a day. So we made a little app. But what we as scientists do often, and I think it's natural, is that we go, hey, user, look at this. It's amazing. Like, look at this. It's super nice. Now we've got this nice map. It's really cool. With the super nice app, so you really need this, right? Something what we do. But there's a danger, of course, to this. It says my meeting will end. Oh, I think it's okay. It's okay. There's a danger, of course, that it doesn't fit, right? Think of the tailor, that we create a product and the user thinks, yeah, it's okay. It's nice. It's a nice shirt, but I cannot use it. Right? It's not useful. So this is something that we really have to think how to turn this around, let's say, this question, because we're very good at, and I know that's what we learned to do in this class. We do a lot of how do we combine scientific information. But we also have to think of the poor kid who has to put the shirt on, right? He's going to be cold. So we can also think of what we call user-driven. That was expert-driven. Can we also take a user-driven approach? So to start with the user, thinking what their needs are. So to essentially to listen and to ask what the user is. What do you do? What do you need? What solutions are needed? Listen to them, to what sort of information is useful to them. For example, we just had a nowadays and we started to talk about it. But indeed, we could ask the user, is describes information useful. Maybe they're sitting next to a big river canal. It's not useful. But if you tell me what Aswan is releasing, or the irrigation department is doing, maybe that's useful. So listen. And also when we talk about it, to build on their knowledge, because people have a lot of knowledge, they know what they're doing. They usually live there a long time. So it's important to start from that position and then go in the climate services value chain, go right, or from right to left, to use those needs to design what you actually are going to use. So, because the other side is more influencing, that we try to influence someone. We show, listen, this is what we have. We tell them, look at this great product, very nice, you should use it. And of course, this is like if you're a salesman, you want to make money. That's what you do. You try to sell your product. But also there you see that we have more local knowledge, and on that side, then scientific knowledge will start to dominate. That okay, the scientific knowledge is very useful. And so, yeah, we try to combine these types of approaches. And a little bit in, it's a little bit about it. In ABCDryBasin, you'll see that in the title, it's this knowledge integration. How do we combine scientific and local knowledge? Is one of the questions. Traditional ways of how do we understand what people do, and then with them try to maybe change some things, but very much with them. So we prefer to take this kind of approach rather than the right approach. And we call this a little bit human-centered design. And I don't know if anybody, I'm not an absolute expert, maybe some of you are experts in this like behavioral economics field, right? And when you think of human-centered design, I quite like this. You start actually, what are the desires of the stakeholders? What do they want to do? And what is it really that they need? What are their needs? What are their wishes? And that's your starting point. But of course, you have to realize not everything is possible. That's okay. That's normal. Because sometimes you start, oh no, we can't do this because there's a problem, you know? Leave the problems first. First, we start to understand what people need. And then we start to discuss and think, you know, what are the priorities? You know, it's like when you go to a restaurant, oh, wow. You know, look at that, they've got all these nice options. And then you look at your home, you know, I don't have so much money, and also my stomach is not big enough. So then you say, I think I like that more than that. So you have to make priorities, you have to choose. That's normal. So that's also part of this human-centered design. It's not that you can make everything, but that you start with the needs, then you have to see what is feasible, and then you have to start prioritizing and choosing what is viable, what can be made sustainable. So very talking about that a lot the previous days. So you can make something fantastic, but it's not sustainable. Then maybe make other choices. Right? Because otherwise, what's fantastic for now, but then in a month it will not work, or a year or 10 years. So I think this is just nice when we are thinking, you know, to what we learn in these courses today is to have these things at the back of your mind. Huh? Right? I'll zoom in into this. So there's a lot of understanding what people need exploring. That's also very nice. To sit with users and just design on a whiteboard. You know, what is it? What would be useful? Just draw. That you're artists. And before you come to the computer, and later you can make it on the computer. I love drawing. I'm a very bad drawer. I'll go a little bit into this detail here, but first we'll come back to that in a minute. So imagine this guy. I don't know who this guy is. But I think he's in Morocco. I'm sure. And I don't know what he's sowing. So I'm looking at you agriculture experts. You know what he's sowing? Seed, but of what? So for now it's going to be wheat. I don't know if it's wheat, but okay. So we really have to understand the context that we're in. And so what is the context of this person? So you can ask questions. What are the activities that you do? What do you do in a season? What decision do you make? Because everybody makes decisions. This person makes a decision. He decided to go and sow the seed. He didn't do it next week, he didn't do it last week, he's doing it now. So he made a decision. Why did he do that? What was the reason for doing it now? There can be many reasons. Some climate. What tools does he use? What knowledge does he have? Nice to start with that question. Okay, what tools do you use? Maybe he looks, I mean, in many times we found people often use their phones. They trust their phone. Look at some websites. Even farmers, huh? They have phones, right? But on the season, so they understand the seasons. Yeah, so they understand the season. But sometimes there's a drought, for example, and they have a problem. So you can also ask, what experience did you have with the previous drought? What happened? How were you affected? How did you experience it? And before the event, what did you see during the event, after the event? You know, so we're really listening to the users, right? And here's an interesting question also, is you just described your experience. So I imagine this is very focused on drought, for example, or but on the extremes. What could have helped? And that's really an interesting question. So thinking back, like storyline, what happened? What could have been useful to you during that event? Very interesting. Talks of like think back to that event and what happened and what could have helped you improve your situation, let's say, or take measures to reduce the impact, how this drought or event impacted you. That's a nice starting point. Because if you can understand that, then you can start thinking, okay, what sort of climate information could be useful to that? Right? It's a starting point for this journey. So it's a lot, maybe this is all very small, you know, to understand, to empathize. It's also a nice word. I don't know if it translates easily in Arabic, to feel with the user. Okay, what's your problem? And understand, oh wow, that's serious, you know, let's take them seriously. And indeed, I'm not going to go into all details here, but please I'll highlight one or two things. To ideate, it's a strange word. So when you do design, you first expand. You try many, many, many things. I also say when I have students who do an MSc, they say, what figure should I